Welcome to the wrap-up presented by AT&T. As you get a look at beautiful downtown Cleveland, and what a Final Four it has been. We have our championship matchup, and indeed it will be a rematch from last year's Final Four, South Carolina and Iowa. Iowa just taking down the UConn Huskies 71-69 moments ago, as we welcome you here inside Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. Alongside the great LaChina Robinson, I'm Sam Ravech. It is empty now, but it was full of Iowa Hawkeye fans cheering on their home team. This seemingly was a home game for Iowa. It was kind of back and forth. Both teams were going at it. It was tied 51-51 after three quarters. And then Iowa started to break out. And you saw Caitlin Clark and her teammates start to play a little bit more like Iowa. Just your quick reaction thoughts from what we saw in the nightcap tonight.
Very interesting game.
Yeah,
I mean, the way that it started, I felt like Gino had come up with one of the best game plans that he had ever concocted, like in the first half of a game that I've seen in the Final Four. They did an excellent job of limiting the impact of Caitlin Clark in that first half. I thought Nika Mule was fantastic. Really just set the tone for a tough physical defense. And that allowed them to get off to a very confident and comfortable start. Look at the steals and the turnovers in this game. I mean, 15 steals for Connecticut. Iowa only ended up with 16 turnovers, but they had majority of those in the first half. But then something happened. Connecticut got into foul trouble in that second quarter. 3 of their starters had 2 fouls. So what happens then? You can't be as aggressive defensively. And I felt like even though we saw that kind of turn of the tide in the third quarter, it started in the second quarter with the foul trouble. And I think that's when Iowa really started to get their bearings.
Iowa doesn't win this game without Hannah Stuelke underneath. And this is an unsung hero for Iowa, has been all year long. She led all scorers tonight with 23 points. It wasn't Caitlin Clark's show, actually. It was Hannah Stuelke's show. How big was she?
She was outstanding. I mean, we talk about the Kate Martins, the Gabby Marshalls, and the Caitlin Clark. That backcourt has the experience, but it really looked like Stuelke was the player that started this game ready to go. I mean, they could go into her on the interior. She was not afraid to go up against Aaliyah Edwards, just using the opportunities to drive from the top of the key. She just looked very comfortable, and you could see her skill. She's always been an incredible athlete, but I thought tonight her skill was really on display, and so she really set the tone. I mean, she went at Connecticut during the stretch where her team in the beginning was out of sorts until everyone could kind of get their bearings in the second half.
It was a quiet 23 points for Stuelke, went 9 for 12 from the field, very efficient. Only 3 rebounds, which is a bit strange for a player that is so big.
She was in on a lot of those, though.
She was, she was. And we will preview the Iowa-South Carolina matchup as well, because Camila Cardoso was excellent for South Carolina today. Before we get to that, just back to UConn for a moment. This is a team that's been depleted by injuries all year long. And we even saw Nika Mule have to leave this game with an injury. And I'm sure all the UConn fans are at home saying, oh, no, not again.
Yeah.
But she came back. She made a crucial 3. I think it was her first made bucket of the second half there to really get UConn back within this, within reach at least of this game. Talk about the last quarter for this game, because I mean, the game was choppy in and of itself. I don't really feel like anybody got into that much of a rhythm. It just felt like both sides were trading blows in the fourth quarter.
Well, Iowa got a little bit of a lead, right? And to the point where UConn started fouling. So you were like, oh, wait, this game may be over. But then there was the Kate Martin turnover at half court. Just a couple of possessions that Iowa scrambled away, and before you knew it, UConn was back in it. That 3 by Nika Mule was part of it. And you have to credit Connecticut, because, again, they looked like they were dead in the water. But the execution down the stretch for Iowa really improved. Like, their experience, in my opinion, like this pass by Caitlin Clark, I was surprised by her giving the ball to Stuelke instead of a guard. And so at this point, I'm thinking they're in trouble. But as we know, it came down to an offensive foul call on Aaliyah Edwards, which I thought that's a tough call, right?
A really tough call in a tough spot.
There wasn't a lot of contact. And when I mean contact, basketball is a contact sport. But it didn't seem like she had used enough force that matched the reaction of Gabby Marshall. Gabby really sold that call, but that's part of defense, some people would say, right? Like, we call it flopping. Some say, hey, she sold it. She deserves to get it. Nonetheless, you come down on the other end, and Caitlin Clark hits the ball off of Paige Beckers on an inbound and runs out the final seconds. It was very bizarre. A very, very strange end of game.
I just want to go back to that offensive foul call, because you made the point before we came on the show. Why even set that screen there? Gino has called a great game. He's called a great tournament for this team. Why have Aaliyah Edwards in that spot when you only need a 2? You
only needed a 2 to win, hit a free throw to tie. But a flare screen is usually for a 3-point shot.
Yeah.
And I probably would have stayed away from screen. I would have maybe gave it to Beckers and just allowed her to go and create. So that was interesting. But hey, Gino has 11 national championships. I'm not trying to tell the man how to do his job. But that call definitely struck me as odd. And in honesty, it put Aaliyah Edwards in a very bad position.
Yeah, really, really special stuff from Iowa. And you see the screen again. Marshall sold it. She's done a good job defensively all tournament long too.
But. And it's very rare late in game, and officials will tell you to stay away from this kind of conversation because they don't think like this. But it's very rare late in game that you see an offensive foul call unless it's something really egregious.
Yeah. UConn set the tone defensively early on against Caitlin Clark. They held her to 6 points, 3 of 11 shooting in the first half. It was her lowest total points in a quarter, or in a half, in the NCAA tournament in her history. What did the Huskies do well in the first half defensively, and how did Caitlin Clark break out of it in the second half?
I mean, they basically lived in her jersey for that first half. Nika Mule, again, she was outstanding. She was physical. Even when they switched, Ashlyn, Paige Beckers, whoever had to switch on to Caitlin Clark, they were stuck to her. And I won't say necessarily that she got frustrated, but she kind of stopped moving at one point, and there was a play where she waited for her teammate to go get the ball. I mean, that's exhausting to have to play against. Caitlin Clark does move a lot offensively to get open, but I just thought she was smothered and covered in the best of ways, which limited their offense. And they just, again, had a lot of costly turnovers, and many of them unforced. I mean, yes, UConn had a good number of steals, but I also thought that Iowa just really looked out of sorts. Credit Connecticut for how they set the tone.
They did set the tone early on, but they were unable to hold on to it down the stretch. They had a chance. They didn't actually even get a shot off in the last couple of minutes, which I think was disappointing. They turned the ball over too many times, I think, in the second half as well. All right. This atmosphere tonight was a home atmosphere for Iowa. Were you surprised by that, or did you expect that the Iowa fans would show up, and what do you think that will play a role in the game Sunday, possibly?
Well, they were either a lot of Iowa fans, or there were Iowa fans plus Caitlin Clark fans, right? So I think there were a lot of people that traveled here to see Caitlin Clark in what is going to be her final stretch of games of her college career. And so I'm not surprised by that. But it does help. It does give you an advantage. And is that Carver Hawkeye Arena? Oh, wow, that place is packed out. So the home fans were in there as well. But, that's not surprising to me. UConn fans usually do travel well, but this was about Caitlin Clark fans, not necessarily all Iowa.
We got a chance to hear from Caitlin Clark talk about this UConn defense and how she was able to maneuver in and out of it. Take a listen.
Honestly, UConn's a really good defensive team. They're one of the best defensive teams we've seen all year. I think Nika did a tremendous job guarding me. We got some good looks. They just didn't go in. And sometimes that's just what happens. We missed some easy bunnies around the rim. But I think the best thing about our group is, we went to the locker room at halftime, and it wasn't like, oh, come on, you got to make shots. It was, no, stop turning the ball over and you're going to be perfectly fine. We knew at some point our shots were going to go down, and, we put up 45 points in the second half, 25 in the third quarter, came out in the fourth quarter and started really hot. So I don't think it was a freaking out of our offense not working. I think it was just it'll come around. We didn't execute great, and we were only down 6. We felt really confident in that, and nobody panicked. Everybody knew just need to clean it up a little bit, and that's exactly what we did.
Sounds like what a National Player of the Year would say. I mean, so confident in her shot. Started 0 for 6, only made 3 threes in this game, but yet she was still able to impact it in so many different ways.
Well, what I think people don't realize, she continued to say we weren't hitting shots. What people don't realize is how important the three-point shot is to Iowa, in particular to Caitlin Clark. when she hits that first three, that puts her at ease. And I think that was the frustrating factor in the first half, was she got, a couple buckets looked here and there, but that three is really what unleashes their offense. That's what creates the space. They've been one of the best three-point shooting teams all season long. And so in that first half, in the first quarter, 2 for 9 and then 1 for 5 in the second quarter. 3 for 7 in the third. So even though that's not big in volume, the percentage goes up. Everyone's shoulders go from here to a little bit more relaxed, and you can see things start flowing from that moment.
I got to imagine, even if it's just 3 made threes, had it been 0 and Iowa would have still won this game, would have been some concern going into that game on Sunday. But just the fact that she's able to see it go in on this floor, I think means a lot for her as well.
When I was telling someone this a moment ago, Kaylin ended up with 21 points, 9 rebounds, 7 assists. Like, it felt like a very pedestrian game.
Nearly a triple-double.
Right, but almost had a triple-double, which is just crazy. It tells you about the standard that she's held to.
Yeah, no question. All right, so this wasn't the only game that we had, obviously, in the Final Four. Let's go back to the early game between South Carolina and NC State. This was a 1-point game at the half. NC State came out really strong and surprised a lot of folks, I think. They made a ton of threes in that first quarter to set the tone, but then the Gamecocks came back out of the locker room. They went on a 29-6 run in the third quarter, and they put the game away. What adjustments did you see that Dawn made for that third quarter run?
Well, I think Aaliyah Boston, not Aaliyah Edwards. Aaliyah Boston did a post-game with Dawn Staley, and she said, "Coach, did you yell at them?" And she was like, yeah. I mean, you got to imagine Dawn was very disappointed in her team in that first half. They just didn't look like themselves. Now, Camila Cardozo looked great, but what happened in that third quarter was this. They outscored NC State 29-6. They shot 60% to NC State's 9%, and they out-rebounded them 15-5. I believe that all of that came from the fact that South Carolina picked up their pace. They started playing faster. In the first half, the tempo of that game really benefited NC State. They're a team that's not going to put up a ton of points. They like to grind it out. They like a low-scoring game. So that was perfect for a half. South Carolina came out, really locked down defensively, got out on the run, rebounded, controlling the glass. Again, let you control pace. Ashlyn Watkins, how many rebounds did she finish with? I don't have that box score, but it was in the double figure. 20 rebounds. Like, insane. So that third quarter was a game changer for the Gamecocks, and I think Dawn got them straight at halftime.
Uncharacteristic, too, some of the mental mistakes that they were making in the first half. They turned it over 10 times in the first half. They only turned it over 5 in the second half. So I think that absolutely made a difference as well.
Yeah, and when you get to this level, when you're at the semifinals of the national championship, you got to expect there to be some settling in that needs to happen in the first half of games. That's why people often say the team that's going to win is the team that gets comfortable earlier on in a game. We keep talking about how young the Gamecocks are, so they come out, and maybe they were a little bit intimidated by the environment. But it's all about your ability to go on a run, and that's what they did in that third quarter. They flipped a switch, and boy, did they look incredible in the third frame.
I don't know how we've gotten this far talking about South Carolina. We haven't really talked about Camila Cardozo. You see there putting up one of her team-high 22 points in this game. She was 10 for 12 from the field. But she really did it all in 3 quarters, LaChina. She didn't play in the fourth quarter, so that's 22 points in 3 quarters.
Well, and she left the game with an injury that I don't know if it was ever, if we know exactly what happened. It looked like one of
leg injury.
Leg injury of some sort. So she left the game, and third quarter she comes out and she picks up right where she left off before the injury happened. So she was just dominant. And I've said time after time that is where South Carolina's bread is buttered, on the interior. She's 6'7". Like, what are you going to do about that? That is something that Lisa Bluter is going to be up the next couple of nights thinking about heading into that national championship game. But it is just, it's tough to stop her. She's got a strong body. And this is one of the better games I've seen her play in terms of setting the tone from the very beginning. She was looking for her shots, asking for the ball, running the floor, and she was the most unstoppable force in that game tonight. Yeah,
really impressive stuff from Camila Cardozo. It looks like she's clearly okay after that injury that she sustained. You see her; she's dealt with some injuries before as well.
Yeah, I mean, you got to go home and ice and rest. And this is one reason why Don had talked the last couple of years about them playing in the first game of this day instead of the second, because that team has more recovery time and the Gamecocks have earned it.
Cardoso gets a lot of shine, rightfully so. Ashlyn Watkins was a menace on the boards today. She became the first player in the history of the NCAA tournament to have 20 rebounds coming off the bench.
Yeah.
How crucial was her play tonight, and how big will it be on Sunday?
You really can't match her athleticism. Like, I was in the green room and sitting next to Muffin McGraw, who has seen it all in her Hall of Fame career, and she said, wow, she is an incredible athlete, and she really is. I mean, she can block shots. She used her length tonight to do that. Just tenacious, rebounding out of position. She comes out of nowhere. Like, you don't think she's in the play or has an opportunity to get a rebound, and there she is. And so just her activity. And the other part of this equation is you have the energy coming off the bench because of the depth that South Carolina has. Like, layers and layers of energy just shifted into the game, substituted in. You've got several players that can contribute in various ways, so that energy stays fresh.
You mentioned it too, or alluded to it. Their versatility, their ability to beat you in a variety of different ways. I thought in the first half it was really, let's pound it in the paint. Let's get Cardoso and Watkins their touches. And then in the second half, it felt like their shooters, their guards got a little bit more comfortable. And you saw Pow Pow start to hit a couple of threes. And some of the freshmen get more involved. Phil Wiley and Tessa Johnson were turning it over a little bit in the first half. They got comfortable. Like, how they just beat you in so many different ways.
They do. And I think the challenge is preparing for a team like that, because I remember when we would have a scouting report, we may go, okay, a strong 6 or 7. You really have to go down to 8 and 9 with this team.
What would your scouting report be against South Carolina if you were to draw one up?
Well, and this is the point about the deep roster. In order to defend a team that has depth, you have to remember everyone's tendencies.
Right.
So you're in the game and you're like, okay, now this one's subbing in. What does she do well? Oh, now this one's subbing in. What did she do? So there's like this mental fatigue that comes in when you're trying to plan defensively. If I was playing South Carolina, first of all, I would hope that I have the personnel to match up with them. You got to be athletic. You got to have a high basketball IQ. You have to have depth, right? So it starts really with the type of roster you have more so than the game plan itself. But I would do everything possible to try to limit their points in the paint. I know that they are shooting the ball very well this year from 3, but I am someone who likes to take away the high percentage shots, okay? I don't want anything in the paint. So I would try to shut down the paint. If you got to double Camilla, if you got to send an extra defender, if you got to shade everybody to the sidelines, baselines, then that's what you do. But I would try to limit their interior impact.
Sounds like mental fatigue, physical fatigue. You're going to get tired playing this South Carolina team.
All of that.
Yeah,
all of that.
All of the above. All right, we'll move along. Let's take a look at Game-Changing Connections presented by AT&T. The connection between Caitlin Clark and Hannah Stuelke has been stellar all season long, but tonight it was excellent as well. They combined for 44 points, 12 rebounds, and 8 assists. Clark had 7 assists in the game. 4 of those were to Hannah Stuelke. So when you look at this duo, which, by the way, has been a duo for a while, they've been playing together for a little bit. What's impressed you about how they get it done?
Their chemistry, how they read each other so well. And the role that Hannah Stuelke plays is really difficult on this team. There's no one else that is fully responsible for the screen and roll action, for the big rebounds, for being that post player that's first down the floor, like Stuelke. I mean, everyone else is pretty much on the perimeter. They play mostly a 4-out, 1-in style. So everything in that paint is hers, offensively, defensively. And as only a sophomore, you just wouldn't expect that level of execution like what we saw in her role tonight. But their chemistry is sensational. Caitlin Clark, it's the way I remember Maya Moore talking to me. She played with Natasha Howard, who's won 3 championships. Maya Moore's won 4. But Maya would always talk about how quickly Natasha Howard went from screen to roll. Like, it's a very efficient. The more efficient that action, the easier it is to execute. And you see that with Caitlin and Stuelke, how quickly they go and how seamlessly. And of course, Caitlin's a phenomenal passer. She's going to put it right in your hand and get you a good look. So that also helps.
Obviously, Caitlin's ability to score the basketball pretty much at any level makes you have to defend her sometimes doubler. I've been really impressed throughout the season that she's not only obviously looking for her shot. She's looking for Stolke. She's looking for her teammates. She's almost become a less selfish player, I feel like, this year maybe than in years prior. But I thought tonight, especially with Stolke, her ability to create space and get so low in the post as well, a lot of her shots were fairly easy shots because she did all the hard work early on.
Yeah, really physical. And that to me, I remember I tweeted something. It might have been back in like December or November about Hannah Stolke, and I said, give me a post player that's got an attitude and that's physical, and I can work with that. Because it's often the biggest challenge for a young post player to adjust to the physicality of the college game. But she is someone who invites that contact. She has a high level of aggressiveness. And she's a fantastic athlete. Lisa Bluter was questioning whether she wanted to play her at the 4 or at the 5 earlier in the season. And because she's not big, like she's not Camila Cardoso. So she ended up putting her at the 5. And once that happened, this offense just started to run very seamlessly. I'm just very impressed by her development and the fact that she's playing with a backcourt. They've played 2 extra years together, right?
Right.
And so here she comes in having to fill in for some big shoes for Susanna, who was an outstanding player last year, being that finisher, being that consistent force, and she's done a great job.
As a front court player, as a post player, what do you think it would be like to play with a person like Caitlin Clark? I mean, would it have made your life just that much easier?
Yes, because the better the passer, the fewer moves I have to make, okay? Which means I can conserve my energy to get offensive rebounds and do other things in the game. So make it easy for me. I want you to put it in my hand when all I've got to do is lay it up.
Yeah.
That's every big's dream.
Yeah.
And so that would be just an awesome experience to play with someone like Caitlin.
All right, so we have a championship matchup coming up on Sunday. That'll be on ABC. It'll be a rematch of the Final Four from last year, South Carolina and Iowa. It was a game that Iowa won by 4 points.
Yeah.
It was a tight one. But if you go back, obviously things have changed. Caitlin Clark still put up 41 points in that game. Camila Cardoso still had a double-double in that game with 14 points and 14 rebounds. But your early thoughts on what's going to be an electric championship game here?
Ooh-wee. Where do we start?
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of eyeballs on this game. You could say it's highly anticipated because South Carolina being undefeated, Caitlin Clark being the best player in college basketball this year. Like, those are the 2 headlines that I believe should have had the most eyeballs. So this is a meeting that's going to be very interesting. I want to see how Iowa responds to the slow start tonight. They cannot do that against South Carolina. I believe South Carolina is going to have a better first half start, but I think it's more important for Iowa to get going. If South Carolina has a slow start, Dawn has options.
Yeah, a lot.
She can sub, hey, everybody out, we're getting a new group in, and just go with a whole new crew. Iowa's got to settle in early. They don't have as many pieces where they can make adjustments, where they can deal with foul trouble. And it's going to take Iowa's best defensive game. It's going to take the best defensive game that they've played because, in all essence, South Carolina's got a lot of pieces that you got to defend, and they've got multiple weapons. So Iowa's really got to come in and be focused on that end of the floor.
Historically, what's on the line here? South Carolina, a chance to win their 3rd national title in 7 years. Iowa, and this is going to be Caitlin Clark's final game.
Yeah.
Final college game on this floor on Sunday. Historically, there are so many great storylines, but I don't know, when you put this game into context, what it means for the game of women's college basketball, what are your thoughts?
Either way it goes, it's going to be something
that's what it feels
very,
like.
very memorable, whatever team wins. I mean, for Dawn Staley, she has built an empire, right? Like, South Carolina is competitive every year at the Final Four level. She's been winning championships. She is at the top of the food chain when it comes to the best coaches in the game, the best recruiters. Like, nobody is doing it like Dawn right now. For Kaylin, she has an opportunity to cement her greatness, right? Like, winning that championship means there's no questions as to her status in the game of women's college basketball. She's at least on your Mount Rushmore if she's not your best player. So there's a lot at stake for both of these programs. I would say more at stake for Iowa. If Dawn doesn't win with this young team, everybody's like, okay, they'll be back. They'll be back next year. That's not the way you want to finish an undefeated season for sure. But more is at stake for Caitlin Clark and Iowa.
Let's get into some of the nitty-gritty here with the matchups. South Carolina's got a lot of depth, like we've said. who do you think they try to put on Caitlin Clark? It was interesting seeing a lot of the UConn players switch off. They were switching on Caitlin Clark tonight.
Yeah, the other thing I think Dawn Staley is going to do is go back and watch some film on how UConn defended. If I was her, I'd be looking to put some link, maybe Bree Hall on her the same way that Nika Mule was guarding Caitlin Clark. I would use like a Bree Hall. But she's got several players that can lock and chase or face guard. And that was one of the keys that I kept talking about with Caitlin. It was, could you put different types of defenders on her? And South Carolina has the ability to do that. But Lisa Bluter also now has time to go back to the drawing board and anticipate Dawn Staley taking that page out of Gino's book. And so I think that's really where it starts, is what happens with Caitlin Clark? Like, how is she defended? What's South Carolina's game plan? And will they go into Camila Cardoso? I mean, they were
that was working tonight.
Intentional about that, right? And how does Hannah Stuelke respond? Because you see how important Stuelke is. So she can't afford to get in foul trouble, but at the same time, you've got to be physical with Cardoso.
That was going to be my follow-up question. Like, NC State did not have an answer for Camila Cardoso tonight. Obviously, Stuelke's a physical type of player. How do you see that matchup playing out underneath? Are they going to need to help out? Do you think they're going to have to bring another defender?
I think on Cardoso, you have to. You got to mix it up. Okay. You can't give her a steady diet of one defender on her, because if she gets you deep, you're left on an island. Yeah, you're on an island. So you got to at least mix it up, maybe trap. I said that that's what I would do, was take away the pain and force them to hit the threes, even though, yes, they've been shooting the three well. And for Stuelke, she's got to try to outrun Cardoso. She's got a little bit more speed, can get up and down the floor. We don't know how Cardoso's leg will be feeling. So can Hannah Stuelke take advantage of that with her athleticism and her advantage, and get up and down the floor and maybe try to tire Camila out?
Iowa played in the national championship game last year. They lost to LSU. They got a chance at redemption here on Sunday. Does that experience, they have some of those players coming back, do you think they have some experience that can help them maybe readjust that mindset and get them ready?
Oh, for sure. And even more than the experience, there's like the revenge factor, right? And even though their loss was not to South Carolina, you still want an opportunity to get back there. That's what you play all season for. And now there's only one game left in our women's college basketball season, and Caitlin Clark knows it's up for grabs. And, I think they'll definitely be thinking more revenge.
South Carolina's going to have some revenge on their minds, right? Because it was Iowa that knocked them out of the Final Four last year.
This is true.
Maybe we'll call it the revenge tour, the revenge game.
Yes,
I don't know.
For both.
Yeah, for both. All right, a quick early prediction maybe from you, LaChina. You're going to take some time to think about it. You want tomorrow? Keep in mind, we got another show.
I don't really need to think about it.
We got a show Sunday. Sunday, we'll be talking about it.
You want me to think about it? I hear the music rolling here. You want me to think about it?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to pick South Carolina.
Yeah.
And I say that because my prediction's already out in the Twitter-verse or social media-verse. So if I'm going to let you hold me accountable in this moment. That I picked the Gamecocks to win.
I don't know. I mean, watching South Carolina play tonight and then watching UConn and Iowa, no offense to UConn and Iowa, but, like, man, South Carolina looked unbeatable.
Yeah, they're on another level.
They really are. They were really special tonight. We'll see what they bring on Sunday. LaChina, thank you so much. It's been a long day. LaChina said she's been working since 8 a.m. 8 a.m. That's a pro in the business. No question.
We have a fun job.
We do. We do. It's special. Thanks so much for watching the wrap-up presented by AT&T. Again, we will have shows on Sunday, pre and post, here in the Rock and Roll City in Cleveland.